Marriage, humanity's oldest subscription plan. You pay up front with your youth and keep paying in instalments of sanity. It's the original recurring payment system, except instead of a polite email reminder before renewal, you get an anniversary fight and an aging sense of obligation. Before digital subscriptions, before the cancel anytime promise, there was this: a lifetime plan with no customer support and a cancellation fee so brutal it requires a legal team. Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "Marriage is the attempt to solve problems together which you didn't have when you were single." He wasn't wrong. Single life's main dilemma is deciding what to eat for dinner. Married life's version involves explaining why there's a wrong way to load the dishwasher. In the grand human experiment, marriage started as a survival contract and evolved into a joint venture in debt, self-delusion, and furniture arguments. Once upon a time, it was about survival, protection, alliance, offspring. Now it's about finding someone who won't judge you for ordering takeout 4 nights a week and pretending to like each other's Spotify playlists. Historically, marriage was insurance. You traded freedom for safety. Your tribe needed stability, heirs, and someone to blame when the crops failed. Today, the crops have been replaced by credit scores and Wi-Fi passwords, but the principle remains suspiciously similar. You bind your fate to another human being, hoping they don't update to a newer model with better emotional bandwidth. Marriage has gone from 2 souls joining as one to 2 browser tabs permanently open and refusing to refresh. And yet we sign up willingly. We mock the $9.99 charge for a streaming service we barely use, but will happily commit to a legal and emotional contract that costs more than a college degree to exit. Why? Because human beings are romantic masochists. We crave permanence, even when it suffocates us. We crave validation so badly that we'll endure a ceremony that costs the GDP of a small island nation just to convince the world our love is tax deductible. The irony? A marriage certificate is the only subscription where terms and conditions are both emotional and legally binding. Love in its raw chemical form is chaos. Dopamine, oxytocin and serotonin throwing a rave in your bloodstream. But marriage institutionalizes that chaos. It takes the unpredictable and turns it into a calendar of anniversaries, grocery lists, and joint insurance plans. What started as primal attraction becomes bureaucratic affection, proof that humans can turn any passion into paperwork. Anthropologist Helen Fisher calls romantic love a biochemical drive, not an emotion. In other words, your body tricked you into this. You didn't fall in love, you fell into nature's algorithm for population control. Maybe that's why marriage feels suspiciously like an auto-renewal. One day you're passionately in love, the next you're checking if your partner remembered to buy toilet paper. The emotional intensity of courtship slowly morphs into the dull hum of routine, like a Spotify playlist you used to love, but now only plays during cleaning. You can't cancel without consequences, and there's no pause membership option. The best you can do is hope your partner agrees to the occasional upgrade like therapy or separate blankets. It's funny in a dark way how marriage has survived everything. Plagues, revolutions, feminism, capitalism, even Tinder. Every century rebrands it, but the mechanics stay the same. It's the eternal subscription of humanity. People keep signing up despite thousands of years of terrible reviews. There's something almost admirable about it. No one looks at history's divorce rate and says, maybe not for me. No, we think, I'll be different. It's the same logic gamblers use at slot machines. Sure, everyone else lost their sanity, but I've got a system. In truth, marriage is the most daring social experiment ever conceived. 2 individuals, each with unique trauma, taste and temperature preferences, voluntarily agree to share oxygen indefinitely. The modern version calls it companionship. Evolution might call it mutual hostage-taking. We glamorize it with love songs and vows, but beneath the poetry lies logistics. Who takes out the trash? Who manages the finances? Who pretends to listen when the other is recounting a dream involving their ex? We say till death do us part, but really it's till emotional exhaustion or bankruptcy do us part. The modern vow should include Wi-Fi speeds, streaming preferences, and who gets custody of the air fryer. Because in reality, forever isn't broken by infidelity or tragedy. It's broken by the silent war over thermostat settings. The decline of civilizations might begin with bad governance, but the decline of marriages begins with passive-aggressive sighs. Still, despite all the evidence, humans continue to believe in the institution. Maybe we need it. Maybe the illusion of permanence is a coping mechanism for our fear of mortality. We can't stop death, but we can at least commit to a shared calendar until it arrives. Marriage gives chaos a name, paperwork, and a matching set of towels. It's absurd, irrational, and deeply human. Proof that we'd rather suffer predictably than be alone with infinite choice. Because here's the real provocation. Marriage isn't about love, not entirely. It's about stability masquerading as romance. It's about locking in your roommate before they discover your true personality. Before they realise you don't meditate, you just scroll TikTok in silence. Marriage is the gamble that someone will find your weirdness endearing, indefinitely. It's emotional capitalism. Invest early, hope for compound interest, and pray the market doesn't crash. And if all else fails, there's the legal side, the only contract where breach of terms involves splitting furniture and possibly a dog. In business, failure leads to bankruptcy. In marriage, it leads to therapy, self-reflection, and a shared Google Doc titled Who Gets What. It's a brutal truth. Marriage is where idealism meets reality, and reality always wins on points. But that's what makes it fascinating. It's both tragedy and comedy, romance and bureaucracy, the human condition wrapped in a tax deduction. Marriage is not a fairy tale. It's a lifelong group project with no option to drop the class. It's beautiful in theory, excruciating in practice, and endlessly renewable. Humanity's longest-running subscription. And whether you call it love, madness, or a joint venture in chaos, we keep hitting accept terms and conditions. Because maybe that's what makes us human. The stubborn hope that next time, the subscription might finally be worth it. Welcome to the biology clause, the part of the marriage contract written by evolution, printed in hormones and signed in temporary insanity. Neuroscience says falling in love is basically your brain on drugs, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, the holy trinity of poor decision-making. It's the same neural cocktail responsible for gambling addiction, impulse shopping, and texting your ex. When you fall in love, you're not experiencing divine connection. You're chemically hallucinating compatibility. Helen Fisher, the anthropologist who dissects romance like a crime scene, once said, "Romantic love is a drive, not an emotion." Translation: your biology is scamming you into a lifetime subscription. It's not about happiness or destiny. It's about getting two DNA strands to cooperate long enough to produce a smaller, needier version of themselves. Love isn't a choice. It's an evolutionary sales pitch disguised as poetry. You're not meant for each other. You're biologically optimized to reproduce and then endure the fallout. Evolutionary biology tells us the truth no wedding vows dare mention. Marriage wasn't built for romance. It was built for child survival, food security, and keeping offspring alive long enough to grow resentful and move out. Love songs make it sound like passion. Biology calls it pair bonding, a mechanism that encourages cooperation between two confused mammals, until their shared offspring can walk, complain, and ask for money. The rest, weddings, anniversaries, romantic dinners, is decorative camouflage to hide the cold evolutionary engine underneath. Neuroscientists have mapped what happens in the brain during the honeymoon phase, and the findings are tragicomic. The dopamine hits are so intense, they mimic the effect of cocaine, nature's way of making sure you ignore all red flags. Your partner's bad habits, their questionable hygiene, their taste in music, all invisible behind the glittering fog of neurotransmitters. Statistically, that fog lasts between 12 to 18 months. Then, like any good high, it fades. The euphoria retreats and you're left sober, staring at socks on the floor and wondering if you were ever in love or just intoxicated by evolutionary chemistry. That's when the second act begins. Withdrawal. The dopamine crash is replaced by oxytocin, the hormone of bonding, trust, and quiet resentment. It keeps couples glued together through monotony, bills, and the slow erosion of mystery. Oxytocin is the neurochemical duct tape of the species. It doesn't make you happy, it makes you tolerant. It's not romance, it's survival instinct in a hallmark disguise. Marriage, biologically speaking, is what happens when I die for you becomes I die if you don't load the dishwasher correctly. And let's be honest, biology never promised satisfaction. It promised replication. Your genes don't care if you're fulfilled, they care if they're duplicated. Evolution's mission is not to make you happy, it's to make you reproduce. Love, then, is nature's clickbait headline. Marriage is the fine print you didn't read before clicking. I agree. You're the host organism fulfilling an ancient subscription you didn't consciously sign up for. It's not romantic, it's reproductive strategy with good PR. Science doesn't spare our delusions either. MRI scans show that the same brain regions activated by love are also triggered by obsessive-compulsive behaviour. That's right. Being madly in love is clinically indistinguishable from being temporarily insane. Your prefrontal cortex, the logical part that makes rational decisions, actually shuts down when you're in love. Which explains the, sure, let's move in together. After 2 months' moments, humanity keeps repeating. Biologically, we're wired to fall in love fast, not wisely. Evolution had no time for therapy or prenups, it just wanted babies. The irony is that modern marriage tries to turn a 12 to 18-month hormonal event into a 50-year legal partnership. That's like expecting a sugar rush to power a cross-country road trip. The biology isn't broken. Our expectations are. We keep trying to stretch a chemical reaction into a lifelong emotional reality, as if love were renewable energy instead of a limited supply of dopamine and delusion. We call it falling in love, but it's really just chemistry with an expiration date and a cultural afterparty. And yet we chase it anyway. Because no matter how many TED Talks, research papers, or divorces tell us otherwise, our brains are junkies for connection. We crave the chemical chaos. We know it's temporary. We know it's irrational. But it feels good. And feelings, not logic, run the show. Philosopher Pascal once wrote, "The heart has its reasons which reason knows nothing of." And biology simply smirked and said, exactly. So where does that leave marriage? If love is a drug, marriage is the rehab clinic. It's where the high wears off and you're left detoxing beside another addict you once swore was your soulmate. Rehab isn't glamorous. It's routine, accountability, relapse, and slow progress. Same with marriage. The dopamine rush becomes oxytocin maintenance. Passion gives way to partnership, lust to logistics. What remains isn't the thrill, it's the discipline, the quiet, unsexy endurance of two humans choosing not to flee the crash site. Biologically, it makes sense. Dopamine drives the chase, oxytocin sustains the bond, serotonin stabilizes it occasionally. These chemicals built civilizations. Without them, No families, no cooperation, no survival. But let's not romanticize it. Your love story isn't written in the stars. It's written in the limbic system, next to the impulse that makes raccoons steal shiny things. Still, maybe that's what makes it tragic and beautiful. We are intelligent enough to know we're being manipulated by biology, but we do it anyway. We chase love knowing it's chemical, we marry knowing it's flawed, we stay knowing it's work. The awareness doesn't free us, it deepens the absurdity. Marriage becomes the ultimate human paradox, a rational commitment built on irrational impulses. So yes, love is a drug, marriage is rehab, and biology is the dealer. You'll never beat the system, but if you're lucky, you might just enjoy the high long enough to forget you're paying for it. Marriage didn't start as a love story. It started as an economic system. It was institutionalized to control property, lineage, and alliances. Love, at best, was the decorative wallpaper over the power structure. You didn't marry for passion. You married for livestock, land, and legitimacy. The original prenup wasn't a document, it was an exchange rate. In ancient times, your marital value was measured in cattle or dowries, not chemistry. Fast forward a few thousand years, and we've replaced goats with mortgages, but the transaction remains suspiciously familiar. If Michel Foucault were alive today, he'd laugh, probably in that unsettling French philosopher way. Because marriage is the perfect example of a social construct disguised as a personal choice. It's a power structure wrapped in a white dress and sprinkled with cake crumbs. Foucault wrote about how institutions shape behaviour and enforce norms under the illusion of freedom. Marriage, then, is society's most elegant form of behavioural control. It whispers, "You're choosing love," while really saying, "Please conform neatly so we can file your taxes correctly." Cultures have glorified marriage for centuries with fairy tales, but the stories all stop at the wedding for a reason. Every film ends on the kiss, the ring, or the carriage ride because nobody wants to watch the sequel. Sleeping Ugly or Beauty and the Bureaucracy. The myth of happily ever after works only when you skip the paperwork, the arguments, and the Costco memberships. The fairy tale edits out the daily grind and replaces it with fireworks and ball gowns. The result? Generations of people raised to expect cinematic love while receiving a domestic sitcom instead. Anthropologists have long argued that monogamy wasn't born from passion, but practicality. It was about inheritance. Who gets the goat, the castle, or in modern terms, the family Netflix password. Marriage stabilised ownership, guaranteed paternity, and created predictable social order. In other words, it made the chaos of reproduction compatible with the needs of property law. The romance part arrived centuries later, like an afterthought added to a user manual. What began as a transaction became a ritual, and what began as a ritual became a moral obligation. And ooh, how the moral machine loves its rituals. Marriage became the cultural stamp of success, proof that you are stable, lovable, and socially approved. A single person is searching, waiting, or still finding themselves, but a married person is settled. Settled into what? Often into mild disillusionment, shared bills, and synchronized disappointment. Yet the culture keeps selling it relentlessly as the gold standard of adulthood. You can reject religion, politics, and capitalism, but try rejecting marriage and watch people react like you've announced a plan to live inside a volcano. Modern culture sells marriage as happily ever after, but its really terms and conditions apply. Every romantic comedy ends at the altar because no one wants to watch two people negotiate whose turn it is to unload the dishwasher. The glitter of love fades under fluorescent kitchen lighting, but the myth persists because it's profitable. The wedding industry is a multi-billion-dollar empire built on the illusion that your happiness can be purchased by the yard in chiffon and fondant. You're not buying a dress, you're buying validation with a return policy that expires at midnight. We live in an age that celebrates individuality, yet we continue to idolize one of the most conformity-driven institutions ever invented. The irony is exquisite. We rebel against corporations, boycott monopolies, and rage against the system, yet we sign up willingly for a legally binding life merger contract. It's like protesting capitalism while financing a Lambo. You can't have both rebellion and brand loyalty. Marriage, for all its romantic marketing, is fundamentally bureaucratic. It's love with paperwork, intimacy with state approval. And once you realise that, it becomes clear marriage isn't just a personal milestone, it's a cultural product sold with lifetime guarantees and no refunds. Sociologists argue that marriage endures not because it works, but because it's woven into our sense of identity. It's a symbol of belonging, a signal that you're normal, mature and functioning according to societal software. Refuse to install that update, and people look at you like your operating system is glitching. Philosopher Slavoj Žižek once said that ideology works best when we think we're acting freely. Marriage is the perfect example. Everyone says it's a personal choice, but somehow the entire culture has the same idea of success. 2 rings, 1 mortgage, endless compromise. Cultural peer pressure has simply changed its outfit. Once it wore religious robes, now it wears Instagram filters. The same force that once told women marriage was salvation, now tells them it's empowerment. Same leash, new leash design. For men, it's still the same old trap disguised as maturity. The narrative evolves, but the control mechanism doesn't. The hashtags might say couple goals, but behind every carefully curated vacation photo, someone is silently debating whether they can fake food poisoning to avoid another family brunch. And yet culture insists that without marriage, you're incomplete. It's not enough to be intelligent, fulfilled, or stable. You must also be chosen. The illusion of exclusivity sells better than freedom. Even the language betrays it. Taken. Off the market, settled down. Marriage is capitalism's favourite metaphor made flesh. A merger of 2 brands into one, endlessly marketed as the pinnacle of success. It's not "I love you", it's "we've gone public". The savage truth is that marriage functions as cultural peer pressure in formal attire. It's the social version of a group chat that won't let you leave. Everyone inside swears it's wonderful, while quietly Googling divorce lawyers near me. Society rewards the appearance of commitment more than the reality of happiness. It's not about how you feel, it's about how stable you look in Christmas photos. But perhaps that's why the scam works so perfectly. It's not enforced through law or fear anymore, it's enforced through belonging. The pressure isn't external, it's internal. We sell marriage to ourselves because we can't bear the thought of being the only one unsubscribed from humanity's oldest institution. So we say yes to the ring, yes to the myth, and hope the cultural renewal fee isn't too steep. Marriage in its modern form might as well have been invented by a Wall Street analyst with a Pinterest addiction. It's not just love, it's a full-blown economic merger, complete with joint assets, long-term liabilities, and an ongoing debate over who ordered the $14.99 mystery charge on Amazon. Joint bank accounts, after all, are capitalism's idea of intimacy. They're like saying, "I trust you with my heart and my overdraft protection." Couples go from candlelit dinners to negotiating who pays for Netflix faster than a startup runs out of investor confidence. Nobel Prize-winning economist Gary Becker once called marriage a market where people exchange resources. Translation: your spouse is your most expensive investment, and the return on investment depends heavily on emotional inflation rates. Becker's economic model of marriage treated love as a kind of trade agreement, where affection, income and domestic labour were commodities. Romantic? No. Accurate? Painfully. Because deep down, even Cupid knows the value of compound interest. In this market of love, you don't fall for someone, you buy in. And like any market, it's driven by expectations, speculation, and occasional crashes. The vows might sound poetic, but in the subtext, you're promising to merge not just your lives, but your spending habits, debt and subscription renewals. Till death do us part was never supposed to be literal. But here we are, paying interest on a honeymoon we barely remember. Then there's the glorious institution of divorce courts, the financial apocalypse of the heart. The exit fees make cancelling a gym membership look merciful. At least when you quit the gym, they don't take half your assets and demand alimony. Divorce by design is the fine print no one reads before signing the contract of forever. It's the legal equivalent of an early termination fee for loving someone too optimistically. And while the court calls it a settlement, it feels more like a liquidation sale where everything must go, including your dignity. According to the American Psychological Association, roughly 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce. That's not a statistic, it's a business risk. If marriage were a startup, no investor would touch it. Imagine pitching it. You give up half your autonomy, tie your finances together, and in return, you might get companionship. Unless market conditions shift, venture capitalists would walk out. Yet every year, millions of people line up to IPO their love lives in white lace and matching rings. And ooh, the weddings. Statistically, the average cost of a wedding in the US now hovers around $30,000, the equivalent of buying a used car you can't resell. But at least the car doesn't demand couples counselling. The wedding industry, with its glossy magazines and algorithmic Pinterest boards, has turned love into an economy of display. You're not just getting married, you're performing solvency. You're saying, look, we can afford coordinated napkins and a live harpist. Our love must be real. Sociologist Eva Illouz once described modern romance as emotion shaped by capitalism. Weddings prove her right. They're rituals designed to prove both emotional and financial worth. Every bouquet toss, every custom hashtag, every 5-tier cake is a receipt disguised as sentiment. The big day is less about commitment and more about branding your relationship for social media shareholders. The love story becomes a lifestyle product. And yet people still do it, because capitalism is clever. It sells the illusion that the size of your ceremony equals the depth of your devotion. The industry whispers that if you just spend enough, you can buy your way into eternal happiness. There's a reason wedding planners sound suspiciously like investment advisors. It's not an expense, it's an investment in your future. Sure, and so was that Peloton. But the economics of marriage don't end at the altar. They get more intricate with every passing year. From mortgage rates to joint tax returns, from daycare costs to retirement savings, marriage is an ongoing financial negotiation disguised as a relationship milestone. Even the most loving couples end up discussing compound interest more often than feelings. It's the long game of emotional capitalism, where affection depreciates faster than your car and resentment compounds like interest. Philosopher Michel Foucault once argued that institutions shape the way we experience power. Marriage is no exception. It's a microeconomy of control and exchange. It teaches us to quantify emotional labour, to measure effort, to audit love. Who planned the vacation? Who paid the bills? Who remembered the anniversary? The invisible balance sheet of affection is endless, and the irony, no one ever achieves equilibrium. The truly savage part is that the system is designed to feel natural. We call it partnership, but it often operates like a small business with no HR department and an unhinged CEO, you. We call it forever, but it's bound by tax law and real estate contracts. We call it love, but it's managed like a joint venture with unpredictable liquidity. In this sense, marriage is less a fairy tale and more a fiscal strategy with emotional side effects. Ultimately, marriage is where romance meets accounting software. It's the place where passion gets reconciled with spreadsheets, and every argument over dinner costs roughly 2 therapy sessions worth of emotional debt. Love languages get translated into financial statements, gifts, acts of service, and the occasional, "Let's not talk about this in front of the accountant." It's both beautiful and brutal, because nothing says commitment like being legally required to split your tax refund. In the economy of love, marriage remains the only contract where your liabilities are more binding than your assets. It's the great paradox of intimacy. The more you merge, the more you owe. Love may be priceless, but marriage will send you the invoice. Marriage is at its core a psychological experiment that never ends. You sign up for it with the optimism of a new subscription, only to realise that renewal is automatic and cancellation requires paperwork, lawyers, and emotional autopsies. Psychologists, in their infinite capacity for gentle euphemisms, describe marital satisfaction as a U-shaped curve. Happiness peaks early, nosedives in the midlife chaos of bills, kids and mutual disappointment, and then allegedly rises again when the house is quiet and both of you have hearing aids. It's essentially the stock market of your emotions, volatile, unpredictable, and driven by irrational attachment to a shared portfolio of memories. In those early years, everything feels euphoric. Oxytocin, the love hormone, floods your system, convincing you that you've found your eternal person. But biology has a cruel sense of humour. Neuroscientists say that after a few years, your brain stops producing those same chemical fireworks for your partner. What's left is the cognitive equivalent of a long-term bond fund, stable, familiar, and wildly unsexy. You stop seeing them as a mystery and start seeing them as someone who loads the dishwasher incorrectly on purpose. The honeymoon phase is, psychologically speaking, just dopamine on credit. Sigmund Freud, the patron saint of uncomfortable truths, believed we marry our unresolved parental issues. Translation: your spouse is a Freudian slip with a mortgage. Every sigh, every argument, every emotional withdrawal is a rerun of some childhood drama. You're not fighting your partner, you're debating your mother's affection and your father's silence through the body of another adult. It's therapy, but more expensive and with shared utilities. Freud would probably argue that we don't choose our partners freely. We just reenact our neuroses until one of us dies or files for divorce. Modern psychology has upgraded the Freudian soap opera into something more data-driven. Research now shows that couples who fight well tend to last longer. The emphasis here is on fighting well, not on not fighting. Translation: arguing is just premium communication. John Gottman, the psychologist who can allegedly predict divorce with 90% accuracy, found that it's not the number of arguments that matter. It's the style. Eye-rolling, contempt and sarcasm are red flags. Which is ironic, considering sarcasm is most couples' primary love language. So if you and your spouse can turn a nuclear argument about trash duty into a stand-up routine, congratulations. You're doing advanced relationship Aikido. Of course, therapy can help. Marriage counselling has become the emotional equivalent of IT support. You only call when everything's crashing. Therapists say they can save marriages, and sometimes they do, if you can afford the copay. Otherwise, it's just you, your journal and Dr. Chardonnay, the silent but sympathetic therapist who pairs well with 8 p.m. regret. Therapy in its ideal form teaches couples how to communicate, empathise and avoid escalation. In reality, it often teaches people how to say, "I hear you, while secretly fantasizing about separate Wi-Fi accounts. Underneath all the neuroses, there's attachment theory, the psychological duct tape of modern love. According to psychologist John Bowlby, we're biologically wired to attach, to cling, to find safety in another person's presence. So marriage, in essence, is Velcro for adults. We latch on, sometimes desperately, even when the hooks and loops are worn thin. Securely attached people turn marriage into a cozy blanket. Anxiously attached people turn it into a haunted house tour of constant reassurance seeking. Avoidantly attached people, they're emotionally renting. No wonder couples therapy feels like tech support for the soul. And then there's the existential boredom that comes with routine. Kierkegaard, with his usual Scandinavian gloom, once said, "Marriage brings one into fatal connection with custom and tradition." Translation: it's boredom in formal wear. The philosopher saw marriage as the slow domestication of desire, the transformation of passion into predictability. What begins as an adventure becomes an itinerary. You stop chasing each other through moonlight and start comparing grocery lists. Kierkegaard would probably advise couples to embrace the absurdity, but let's be honest. Most couples just embrace separate Netflix profiles. Psychologists love to frame marriage as a series of compromises. Compromise sounds noble, but in practice, it's trench warfare over thermostat settings, dinner plans, and which side of the bed offers less existential dread. Compromise is where individuality goes to die wearing matching pajamas. It's the art of negotiating peace in a tiny shared kingdom where neither of you is truly sovereign. Still, there's something undeniably human about it all. For all its emotional chaos, marriage provides structure. It forces two flawed people to develop coping mechanisms, communication, empathy, restraint, that single life rarely demands. Psychologists call this co-regulation, the process of managing emotional states together. In plain terms, it means one person panics while the other Googles how to calm your spouse. It's symbiosis, occasionally codependence, but deeply human. And maybe that's why we keep subscribing. Despite the psychological toll, despite the data, despite the midlife crashes and emotional audits, we renew the subscription, year after year, some out of love, some out of habit, some because they forgot to uncheck auto-renew. We stay because we crave the familiar madness of someone who knows all our neuroses and hasn't fled. The psychology of marriage isn't about eternal bliss, it's about endurance. It's about learning to love through the cycles of boredom, chaos, and repair. It's about realizing that even when the chemistry fades and the therapy bills pile up, there's something profoundly comforting in being known. Flaws, Freudian slips, and all. So yes, marriage is the ultimate psychology subscription. You sign up for the intimacy, stay for the shared coping mechanisms, and eventually discover that the true test of love isn't passion, it's patience. Freud might call it neurosis. Kierkegaard might call it tragedy. Modern psychologists just call it normal. The rest of us, we call it Tuesday. Romance, that glowing illusion sold to us in soft lighting and orchestral swells, is the world's oldest scam. Every romantic comedy, from Shakespeare and Netflix, ends right at the wedding. Curtain drops, credits roll, the audience swoons. Because no one pays $12 to watch two people argue about bookshelves and who forgot to buy toothpaste. It's not cinematic when passion gives way to furniture assembly instructions and emotional inventory management. The happily ever after isn't an ending, it's a billing cycle. Poets, of course, have made a career of overhyping love. They write as if passion were a religion and heartbreak its sacred ritual. But even Rilke, the philosopher-poet of tenderness, slipped the truth between the stanzas when he said, "Love consists in this, that two solitudes protect and touch and greet each other. beautiful, profound, until those two solitudes start fighting over who's paying the next bill. It's easy to romanticize solitude when you're writing in a candlelit attic. Much harder when you're staring at an unpaid electricity bill with someone humming loudly beside you. Romance is fireworks. Marriage is the smoke alarm that follows. It's thrilling until someone has to find a towel to wave under the detector. Love begins in poetry and ends in logistics. The Greek philosophers, who analysed everything from virtue to the shape of desire, knew this too. Plato's Symposium imagined love as the search for our missing half, our soul's completion. A flattering notion, sure, but finding your other half often means discovering someone with a completely different thermostat preference. Philosophically speaking, that's hell with scented candles. Literature for centuries has turned marriage into a holy grail of emotional fulfillment. From Austen's Pride and Prejudice to every Hallmark script written since 1997, marriage is the final triumph, proof that love conquers all. Yet reality edits that script brutally. Love doesn't conquer all, it just signs a 30-year mortgage. In real life, passion is replaced by partnership. And partnership, despite what the rom-coms say, is mostly about scheduling and compromise. There's less you complete me, and more please remember the recycling. Psychologists have long tried to decode why romance fades. The honeymoon phase, they tell us, is just neurochemistry, dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin. An intoxicating cocktail that fades once your brain realizes you've seen this person chew 10,000 times. Studies by biological anthropologist Helen Fisher show that long-term couples move from passionate love to what's called companionate love. Translation: from wild desire to quiet endurance. It's not worse, it's just different. But it's not the stuff of sonnets. No poet ever wrote, "My love, your reliability gives me mild satisfaction and low anxiety." Romance is irrational by nature. It's driven by projection, fantasy, and timing. Marriage, on the other hand, is the state-sanctioned spreadsheet version of that madness. It takes the fluttering chaos of desire and tries to convert it into an institution with joint tax returns and legal penalties. The French philosopher Alain de Botton, who's made a modern career of demystifying romance, argues that we fall in love not with people, but with versions of them, our own idealized projections. Marriage, therefore, is the process of slowly discovering the truth beneath those projections, one dishwasher argument at a time. It's not the death of love, but the disillusionment of fantasy. And that disillusionment, oddly enough, is where something real begins. Romantic culture doesn't want to admit this. It thrives on idealism. Advertising, movies, even wedding magazines depend on the myth that love is eternal passion. True love lasts forever, they whisper, usually next to a photo of a 3,000 diamond ring. But passion, according to neuroscience, burns out faster than a scented candle in a drafty room. The dopamine circuits that make early love exhilarating are biologically designed to fade. If they didn't, humanity would never get anything done. Imagine trying to file taxes while your brain is in permanent romantic delirium. It would be chaos. So nature, the original realist, intervenes. It swaps infatuation for stability, lust for laundry, and fireworks for grocery lists. And yet we cling to the illusion, because reality stripped of its poetry feels too blunt. We prefer to live in stories where love defies decay, where couples grow old hand in hand without once mentioning whose turn it is to vacuum. The romance myth comforts us. It tells us that love can be pure, permanent, and immune to entropy. But the truth is more complex and more interesting. Real love is not about sustained passion, it's about sustained patience. It's not about fireworks, but about tending embers, small, unglamorous, necessary acts that keep warmth alive long after the sparks fade. Even the philosophers who romanticized love knew its paradox. Nietzsche wrote, "It is not a lack of love, but a lack of friendship that makes unhappy marriages." In that single line, he exposes the fraud of eternal romance. Love as passion is fleeting. Love as friendship, shared humour, mutual respect, co-survival through life's absurdities is what endures. But friendship doesn't make for thrilling cinema. No one buys tickets for two people who emotionally regulate and respect each other's boundaries. It's not a blockbuster, it's a Tuesday. The savage truth. Romance is the bait. Marriage is the switch. Society sells you the fantasy of eternal desire, then hands you the reality of recurring chores. It's the longest running bait and switch in human history. You buy into a marketing campaign older than religion, reinforced by poets, priests, and dating apps. All promising transcendence, all delivering domesticity. Yet paradoxically, there's a strange beauty in that fall from grace, because beneath the ashes of romantic delusion lies something sturdier: partnership, humour, shared resilience. The smoke alarm may be shrill, but at least it means the fire once burned bright. In the end, romance isn't dead, it just grows up. It trades candlelight for daylight, fantasy for function, and poetry for prose. Maybe that's not the tragedy we think it is. Maybe the real miracle isn't in the fireworks, but in surviving the smoke together. After all the science, sociology, and collective trauma disguised as romance, people still line up for marriage. We've just spent thousands of years proving it's a biological scam, a cultural con, an economic sinkhole, and a psychological minefield. And yet every weekend, somewhere in the world, someone's saying, "I do," with the enthusiasm of someone signing a user agreement they didn't read. It's not rational, it's ritualistic, maybe even masochistic, but undeniably human. The paradox of marriage lies in this: it limits freedom but manufactures meaning. It binds two people into a social contract that both suffocates and stabilizes them. It's the paradoxical freedom of having boundaries, the way a river flows best when it's contained. Freedom without structure is chaos. Structure without freedom is prison. Marriage, in its best form, pretends to be the middle ground, the chains that keep you from drifting too far from yourself. Of course, most days it feels like those chains are welded by shared Google calendars. Nietzsche once said, "It is not a lack of love, but lack of friendship that makes unhappy marriages." Translation: marry your best drinking buddy, or at least someone whose neuroses complement your own. Nietzsche, the philosopher who declared God dead, still had enough faith in human connection to see companionship as salvation. Friendship, not passion, is the antidote to the entropy of domestic life. It's what transforms the cage into something resembling comfort. Because if you're going to be handcuffed, it helps if the other person is at least fun at parties. Philosophically speaking, marriage is humanity's greatest attempt to domesticate chaos. It's civilization's way of saying, you too, pair up, pay taxes, and stop destabilizing the tribe. Anthropologists argue that long-term pair bonding evolved not out of romance, but efficiency. Fewer wandering lovers meant fewer unpredictable children and more predictable inheritance. In other words, marriage was never about love. It was about logistics. The chain wasn't emotional, it was administrative. Yet somehow in that bureaucracy of affection, we found something that resembled meaning. Modern freedom worships autonomy, the right to swipe, to ghost, to focus on yourself. But total freedom, ironically, becomes its own kind of prison. Endless choice, zero commitment, infinite loneliness. The sociologist Zygmunt Bauman called it liquid love, relationships that dissolve the moment they solidify. Marriage, in contrast, offers solidity at the cost of liberty. It's the trade-off of human existence distilled into one legal contract. You exchange the thrill of the unknown for the comfort of the known, chaos for company, loneliness for logistics, freedom in chains, paradox perfected. And yes, it's still absurd. On paper, marriage makes as much sense as signing a lifelong lease on another human being's habits, moods, and dental hygiene. But that's what makes it fascinating. It's irrational, but so is everything that makes life worth living. Art, belief, hope, and other people's playlists. Marriage might be the most irrational of all because it demands daily forgiveness of another person's flaws, all while they're simultaneously observing yours in high definition. It's emotional surveillance disguised as intimacy, yet we keep doing it, generation after generation, because without those connections, our glorious independence starts to feel like exile. Let's not forget the comedy of it all. Marriage is often described as an institution, and like most institutions, it thrives on bureaucracy and shared delusion. You file for it, sign for it, and renew it socially every anniversary. It's a prison, yes, but at least you're allowed conjugal visits. The wedding vows might as well include, I promise to love, honour, and occasionally fantasize about separate bathrooms. It's absurd, but maybe that's the point. Humans crave stability even when they mock it. We build emotional prisons, then decorate them with throw pillows and anniversary dinners. Psychologists say that humans need both attachment and autonomy. The push and pull between dependence and independence. Marriage sits squarely in that impossible tension. It's the grand compromise between, I want to be free, and please don't ever leave me. It's where individuality goes to collide, merge, and occasionally scream into a pillow. The irony is that by surrendering a piece of your freedom, you create a deeper kind of safety. The chaos of total choice becomes the peace of predictable companionship. The cage, when chosen consciously, can feel like sanctuary. And maybe that's why, despite every red flag, people still sign up. Marriage gives structure to emotion, purpose to chaos, ritual to randomness. It's not a fairy tale, it's a survival mechanism wrapped in romantic language. Like most human inventions, it's flawed, funny, and occasionally catastrophic. But it persists because it satisfies something primal, the need to be known, witnessed, and tolerated. In a world obsessed with optimization and self-fulfillment, marriage remains beautifully inefficient, and the inefficiency feels like rebellion against the algorithmic coldness of modern life. In the end, marriage isn't about perfect love, it's about imperfect persistence. It's two people saying, yes, I see your madness, and I'll sign here anyway. It's a subscription you can't easily cancel, one that auto-renews through arguments, bills, and birthdays. The fine print is hellish, the customer support non-existent, but every now and then it delivers a moment of startling humanity. A look, a laugh, a quiet understanding that feels like home. Maybe marriage is proof that humans will trade freedom for shared Wi-Fi, rent, and someone to blame when the milk runs out. Maybe we don't want absolute liberty after all. We just want a co-signer for our existential lease. And even when the system crashes, when love mutates into logistics and the romance burns down to smouldering ash, we keep signing back up, because somewhere deep down, we believe the chains might just keep the chaos out. So here's the closing punchline. Marriage is the original subscription service you can't cancel, unless you're willing to pay half your soul in court fees. And maybe that's what makes it the most human invention of all. A voluntary paradox, a contract of chaos, a freedom you have to fight to keep even after you've given it away. We accept the paradox because, for better or worse, it's our chosen chaos, and strangely, we wouldn't have it any other way but call it Tuesday.